Folks, our next speaker is a uniquely courageous and gifted leader. He's the winner of 2 Purple Hearts, the Bronze Star with Valor, and the Silver Star. He took over as your NRA president last year and has hit the ground running with the energy and conviction you would expect from a United States Marine. He's an American hero. He is my hero, and we are truly lucky he's one of us. Please turn your attention to the video screens.
They're going to make decisions based on who they believe is the best leader.
The experience of a mayor in America is highly relevant to executive leadership.
I can answer the call, which is leadership that's going to bring us together.
There's a lot of talk about leadership these days and a whole lot of phonies who pretend to walk in leaders' shoes. But it takes more than followers to make a leader. That title is not granted through election or celebrity or praise, but proven under fire. A leader is a selfless individual, attentive to the true needs of those he serves, his hand on the wheel, his eye on the future, and his heart in the task. A rock-solid purveyor of truth and defender of justice, relentless in the face of wrongful criticism. In a leader's house, blame does not fall on any shoulders below his own. No. A leader is the man who stands in front of the angry mob with his arms crossed and says, if you're going to lay the blame on anybody, you're going to lay it on me. A leader sets the vision for others to follow. And then he straps up his boots and walks by their side every last bloody, swollen step it takes to reach the promised land. And he never forgets the people he serves, because it is in their hearts and minds where leaders rise and leaders perish. The NRA is blessed with the finest. Our president, Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North.
Let's hear it for your NRA president, Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North.
Thank you all. I noticed you had some of those. I did not know that it was going to happen. So Chris told me just before, watch it before you come out on stage. And I just asked him, where did he get the pictures of my younger brother? You know, I always feel at home at an NRA annual meeting, surrounded by law-abiding citizens of this great republic, folks who love our country. I admire your patriotism, your independent spirit, your commitment to America's traditional values. And what a great privilege it is to be here with our great president and vice president. I don't know if you understand, history was made right here just a few hours ago as he revoked the treaty that was going to restrict the Americans' abilities to move firearms around the world, a UN treaty. That's never happened in a great public setting like this before, so you got to be an eyewitness to history. You know, it's special to have a president and a vice president, such strong supporters of the National Rifle Association and our Second Amendment. I get asked a lot as I travel around the country, what is it that you think makes America great? Because I have a long experience with the military. I grew up in the military. My dad was a soldier. And I've been most of my life in uniform of some kind or another. And so my answer is very short. What makes America great is one word, and it's freedom. Freedom. And thanks to you, members of the NRA, our Second Amendment freedoms are better defined and protected for law-abiding citizens than at any point in my lifetime. And I'm getting on a few years. Along the way, our enemies of freedom and us have called us every nasty, evil name in the book. They've tried to shame us and blame us for tragedies that should have and could have been prevented, and they've threatened to destroy us. But your NRA has stood firm and fought them back. And it's because of the NRA and grassroots activists like all of you that every American, especially the 100 million who own firearms, can see their freedoms more clearly today than ever before. It's the gun you keep at home to protect yourself and your family. You heard some of that just a few moments ago up on the stage. It's in your wallet where you keep your CCP. It's in the Heller and McDonald Supreme Court decisions upholding an individual right to own a firearm. And you can see the NRA stand for freedom in the victories of the elections of 2000 and 2016. And no one can dispute that our freedoms were reinforced when the NRA went all out to get Judges Gorsuch and Kavanaugh appointed to the Supreme Court. We've proven that the NRA stands for what's right. We don't give in. And freedom must win again in 2020, or all those hard-won achievements and victories I listed are in peril. Friends, I've never been one to pull punches. 2 years ago, the NRA warned Americans of the dangers from increasingly violent Antifa raging left. We saw the window-smashing mobs and the fiery protests. And last year, the NRA sounded the alarm about the rising scourge of socialism. And today, powerful, well-funded progressive socialists openly lust for positions of power, including the White House. And they grow stronger and more vocal and more determined than ever before. President Trump said it best in the State of the Union.
America was founded on liberty and independence, and not government coercion, domination, and control. We are born free, and we will stay free. Tonight, we renew our resolve that America will never be a socialist country.
You know, friends, he's right, as long as the NRA remains strong. And if you stay active in the political arena, socialism will never ruin the United States of America. But progressive socialists have seized the levers of power in state governments and the U.S. House of Representatives. If they get the Senate in 2020, and God forbid, capture the White House in 2 years, we can kiss our freedoms goodbye. My hope is the American people are going to come to realize that the left has gone too far and now threaten everyone's freedom. America is the greatest place on earth because Americans are the freest people on earth. We're the only nation in all history with a Constitution that begins with the words, "We the people," thus defining who governs our country. Not wealthy oligarchs who despise us as deplorables. They denigrate us for clinging to our Bibles and our guns. Remember those words? Well, ours is the only Constitution recognizing God, not some prince or potentate, as the grantor of the blessings of liberty. Ours is the only Constitution with a Bill of Rights to protect every citizen from the awesome power of government. And ours is the only founding document giving every law-abiding citizen the right to pray or not, as we believe, to come and go as we want, to speak as we please, and among those other freedoms, the right to keep and bear arms with absolutely no constitutional restrictions. Ours is the only country on the planet where every law officer, every member of the armed forces, every elected official takes an oath of office with words like these: "I do solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I take this obligation freely without any mental reservations or purpose of evasion." That pledge is not to a pantheon or a person or a political party. It's to the Constitution, all of it, every single word in it. And that ends with that oath. Anybody remember what it ends with? "So help me God." You know, I've raised my right hand to take and administer that office hundreds of times since I first did so in front of a Marine recruiter on the 29th of December, 1961. I know none of you women were born yet, but I know some of you guys were back then. You know, on the 8th of September last year, I again pledged to support and defend our Constitution when I was given the privilege of serving as your president of the National Rifle Association of America. Thank you. You know, I've been blessed to keep company with heroes who defend our freedoms overseas as a U.S. Marine and as a war correspondent. But I now get to keep company with the men and women of our nation's oldest civil rights organization, the National Rifle Association of America. Since 1871, our members have been defending our freedoms here at home because, you see, the NRA is all about freedom. As many of you know, the NRA is now in the midst of a serious fight to protect the Second Amendment and the First Amendment against the governor of New York, up in Albany, New York, a court case in the U.S. District Court. Now, here's something that most people don't understand, and let me share it with you, because I want you to take these words back home with you. Our opponents call themselves gun control advocates. It sounds so sensible, but of course, that's not what they really are. They're not. They should call themselves what they really are, the militant, well-funded vanguard of the Disarm America movement. That's what they really are. They aren't going to be content to simply ignore the last 4 words of the Second Amendment, shall not be infringed. They want to intend to eliminate the entire 27 words and confiscate every privately owned firearm in our country. In fact, for the very first time in my now long life of 3/4 of a century, for the very first time, a retired justice of the Supreme Court has urged the repeal of the Second Amendment. In Hawaii, the legislature has proposed a resolution to abolish the individual right to keep and bear arms. What they intend is to disarm you. No Second Amendment, no freedom. You just heard some of the effects of what you can do if you've still got it. Virginia stood right here at this podium, a fellow Virginian, I would point out, and pointed out how her right to keep and bear arms saved her life and that of a 6-year-old daughter when her home was broken into. You see, if there were no civilian ownership of firearms, she probably would have been unable to stand at this podium because she would have been killed. The Second Amendment's the purest metaphor for the idea of freedom, because if you're not free to defend yourself and your loved ones, you're really not free at all. Our Second Amendment is unique. No other country has anything like it. But if the Disarm America movement takes control of our government in 2020, every single one of those God-given individual freedoms, guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution, will be up for grabs. That means the America that we know now will cease to exist. I want to just share something with you. The good Lord bless my best friend and me. My best friend and me got married 51 years ago. We now have 17 and a half grandkids. The next one is due on August 5th. And people say, why did you take on such a tough task? Because I want those 18 grandchildren to have the same rights and privileges that you and I have grown up with. They deserve to do that because they're American citizens. I get criticized a lot by my colleagues in the so-called mainstream media for saying things like, well, they're after our guns, but they really are. And if you think I'm exaggerating, get this. In the U.S. House of Representatives, they've now introduced legislation to start disarming Americans. They want to ban the most commonly owned semi-automatic rifles and magazines in the country. You just heard up here on the stage Mark Vaughn and Stephen Williford, who used those weapons to save the lives of other people. And the adversary was armed with weapons as well. You see, if they didn't have those very, very common and popular firearms and magazines, because somebody decided in Washington or a state legislature that they couldn't have them, they might not have been alive and saved the lives of others either. They're also looking at ways to put the government thumb on private transfers between friends and family. Let me describe something that we do in our family. I did it with our kids, and now I'm doing it with my grandkids. When they turn 14, I give them a box. And on the box is a label that says, if you learn to use everything in this box, you'll never go hungry, you'll never be lost, and you need fear nothing. But you have to learn how to use everything in the box, and I will show you how. And inside the box, when they open it up, the first thing they find is a Holy Bible. And if it's one of the 11 boys, it's open to Proverbs 31. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, when you get back to your hotel room, you guys look up Proverbs 31, because the last 20 verses are all about the kind of wife I have. How do you think we ended up with 18 grandkids? And the second thing they find in that box is an NRA life membership card. I said, you just hang on to that till you're 18, and I'll show you how to use that at the ballot box in an election. The third thing they find is a lensatic compass and a map sheet. It just happens that I'm a kept man on my wife's family farm, and out in the woods are old ammo boxes, an engineer's stake welded to it, driven into the ground with a number on it. And I teach them how to use that lensatic compass and that map sheet to navigate on terrain features in the Shenandoah Valley. And the last thing that they find in that box is the first thing that they want to use. It's a 20-gauge shotgun. And of course, that's the first thing. I said, no, you're going to start with that book, and then work on, I'll show you some stuff about that card, and then I'll show you some things about how to land navigate, because someday the GPS might not be here. And then I'll take you out and show you how to field strip that 20-gauge shotgun, clean it, put it, when you can take it apart and put it back together again in 2 minutes blindfolded, I'll take you out and show you how to shoot it. I'll show you how to safely use that. And then I'll take you out hunting with the finest bird dog on the planet Earth, Casey the Wonder Dog. That's the kind of thing, if we kept doing that kind of thing for our families across the country, we wouldn't have problems getting more hunters signed up. And I've got, like I say, a lot of people to practice on. Now, some of the other things that they're doing to infringe on that Second Amendment, there's a provision in law in Florida and other states, and the government's looking at this in Washington in the House of Representatives. It's a ruling that young adults who defended our nation in the armed forces carrying a real assault weapon aren't old enough to buy an AR-15 when they come home to defend their families. Think about it. 18-year-old goes in the U.S. Marines, comes back after 2 years of service, he's 20. He can't buy a weapon that looked like the weapon he carried because somebody decides it's, quote, an assault weapon. That's part of the problem of our so-called mainstream media. Now, here's a little dirty little secret about this Disarm America movement. They know well that criminals are still going to break every law they can and that evil still exists. But when another terrible travesty occurs, they will proclaim, we've tried everything else. Just like in New Zealand, they'll conclude confiscation is the only answer. And at that point, honest law-abiding citizens and gun owners will have lost all their rights. That's why the progressive socialists are wedded to a common fanatical goal. It's to destroy this NRA. They know if they can get us out of their way, they're well on their way to your freedom. That's why they push corporations and banks and insurance companies and sporting goods stores, even coffee shops, to stop doing business with the NRA. That's why the so-called mainstream media has ramped up its shrill vitriol and to shame and scold and smear the NRA. All this because the progressive socialist Disarm America movement knows there's only one organization that can stop them, the National Rifle Association of America. We have more than 5 million members. We need more. You know, some of you remember when Charlton Heston was the president of this great organization, and I'm honored, truly, to follow in his footsteps as president of the NRA. But I have to point out that Charlton Heston was Moses. Moses gave us 10 commandments. I'm a United States Marine. I'm here to deliver 10 million members before the 2020 elections. You know, all of us in this stadium share some very common values. We love our country. We believe the U.S. Constitution is the law of the land. We're committed to civic duty and are willing to protect our freedoms. We don't take a knee. We proudly stand with hands over our hearts for our flag and our national anthem. Watch this. When you take a knee during our national anthem, you disrespect the men and women who lost their limbs so you could spend your Sundays playing games. When you dishonor our flag, You turn your back on the families of heroes serving on the front lines, whose sacrifices make it possible for cameras to focus on your disgraceful protests. And when you teach children that our police are the enemy, you turn your back on the very law enforcement that keeps your stadium safe. We fight for the First Amendment as much as the Second, but while you use it disgracefully, we use it to tell the truth. We stand for our country. We stand for our veterans and our military. We stand for our law enforcement. And we stand for our flag, because we're still freedom's safest place. I love making those little shorts. And it drives the Disarm America movement nuts, which is kind of fun as well. Let me make this really personal. Help me double our strength and political clout to preserve our Second Amendment. And the good news is that we, the people, really do get the last word at the polls. Every single vote by Americans like us can make all the difference in preserving freedom. And since I'm fond of talking to and about God, let me ask you all to pray for the American people, pray for our country, and pray for our NRA. We do know that freedom is what makes America great, because we're the National Rifle Association of America. We're guardians of liberty, and yes, we are still freedom's safest place. God bless you, and thank you for being here. So, it's my honor now to introduce a real American hero. We, the National Rifle Association, gives an award away to the Law Enforcement Officer of the Year. So this is the 2018 Law Officer of the Year. And I just lead out just a little bit about it so you get a grasp. By the way, you can watch the entire video on your computer tonight by going to NRATV.org and clicking on American Hero on the button. You're about to see a real American hero. Sergeant Mike Parsons, last July 3rd, was anything but a normal day for him. When he put on his uniform and donned his badge and strapped on his gun and went out to serve and protect the community of Tulsa, Oklahoma, he had no idea that his day would end in a gunfight and a bullet in his thigh. Here's how it happened. On July 3rd, 2018, 2 Tulsa police officers called for backup to assist with an uncooperative suspect barricaded in the back of a van. The first to arrive was the person every Tulsa law officer wants to see in a difficult situation, Sergeant Mike Parsons.
The vehicle pulls up, I see that it's Mike, and the first thought that went through my mind is, this is exactly the guy I want here.
After quickly assessing the situation, Sergeant Parsons decided to entice the suspect to vacate the van using non-lethal pepper balls.
Making that person leave that confined space and come to the officers is what's safe, because you don't know what's in that car.
Pepper ball, pepper ball, pepper ball.
You gotta go.
At that point, the suspect grabbed a hidden pistol and fired at Sergeant Parsons, hitting him in the thigh and dropping him to the ground in the line of fire.
Sergeant, are you hit?
As 2 officers dragged him to cover, Sergeant Parsons maintained his composure and kept his service weapon trained on the suspect.
I yelled at Con when he was dragging me, and I'm like, just get me on my feet. That's just what I needed for me to get reset.
Something hit me bad in the thigh. Right here.
We need to get you out of here, Sergeant.
Nope.
You train that if you get shot, you're not dead. Keep going.
Panic was not a choice that day. It was just doing what we're supposed to do.
Does anyone have a shield?
He quickly devised a tactical plan and directed his officers in carrying it out.
Go around this direction and look in from the other side. You understand me?
Copy.
It led to the suspect's arrest without another lethal shot being fired, all while ensuring the safety of his officers, nearby civilians, and even the suspect who shot him.
The suspect was saved by the man that he tried to kill, and that's just a fact.
Despite being wounded, his demonstration of courage, leadership, and devotion to duty were exemplary.
a true credit to law officers everywhere, and the reason Sergeant Mike Parsons is NRA's Law Enforcement Officer of the Year.
Ladies and gentlemen, for his service, his courage, and valor under fire, please join me in welcoming and honoring the 2018 NRA Law Enforcement Officer of the Year, Tulsa Police Sergeant Mike Parsons, and his lovely family. There's something special about it, and I don't want to give it away. But I would just tell you, even though Danielle's a whole lot better looking than her husband, she is also a law officer. And if you watch the rest of the video, you will see something that, quite frankly, I've seen a lot of gunshots. I've seen a lot of people hurt, a lot of people killed, but I've never seen a wife have to pull her husband out of the line of fire. So I want you to watch that, tell others about it, because this is a hero family, and they're all part of the NRA. God bless you, brother. Friends, all of this, it's kind of like being the cleanup hitter at a baseball game. All of this is to encourage you to go back home and find others who feel as you do, who stand for those same qualities I described that we represent, that understand the extraordinary courage of that thin blue line of those brown-clothed sheriff's deputies around America. We stand with them. That's why we choose a Law Officer of the Year from the thousands of officers who do heroic things every time, every day. Every day that they strap on a firearm, put on a badge, and go out in the street, they are in harm's way. And the classical definition of a hero isn't someone who wears a spandex suit and a cape. It's not someone who sets a new Olympic record. But the qualifications of a real American hero is a person who puts themselves at risk for the benefit of others. And every law officer in America does that every day when they go out on the streets. Just for me. Next time you see a cop on the street, walk over and say, thank you. God bless you, and thank you for being part of this tonight.